Okay, everyone, welcome back. It's so good to see a full room after a networking break because people do sometimes get carried away with their coffee and forget to come back upstairs. So I do appreciate it. But I can see why you've all come back upstairs because this for me is one of the real highlights of day one here at Sustainability Live Net Zero. And that is our panel discussion, The Future of Electric Cars in a Net Zero World, brought to you in association with Kearney. And we have an outstanding panel for you today. Starting on the far side of the line of chairs, we have Kristen Seaman, Chief Sustainability Officer at General Motors. We have Angela Hultberg, Global Director of Sustainability at Kearney. We have Federica Claren, Head of Sustainability at Polestar. And closest to me, we have Anissa Costa, for the Chief Sustainability Officer at Rivian. That was quite a mouthful for me to get all of those titles and names out. I hope I did them justice. Warm round of applause for our panel, please. Okay, we've got an enormous lot to get through today, and we will get to questions at the end. I will be up with the microphone and finding you in the audience, which is incredibly Saturday night TV, and I'm rather looking forward to it. So let's crack on. Let's look at the challenges first, as that always seems like a good place to start. And for anyone who saw me attempting to pour the water here, it is a bit of a glass half empty stock. We're going to look at the challenges and the problems and the blockers to EV adoption. Kristen, we'll start with you. For you, what are the things that really are blocking the adoption happening at an even greater scale than it is already?
Sure, thank you. So first off, thanks for having me here today. It's great to be on panel here with, I would say, colleagues and friends. So, if you think about the EV transition, there's a lot of great things happening. I tend to be an optimist by nature, so I'll try to answer your question with the glass half empty. But really, the products are really starting to accelerate and hit the market. One of the things that has happened up till now is there hasn't been a lot of choices for consumers. A lot of the EVs were high-end luxury vehicles. Infrastructure wasn't maybe necessarily available, which is still a significant challenge across the globe, is charging infrastructure. And then I would say on top of that is education for consumers, that they really can live within an EV world. I often use my parents as an example. They live close to me. My house is probably about the farthest they drive, and they still want to see EV charging along the route, even though it's probably 25 miles away. But consumers are used to seeing gas stations on every corner. And so it is a little bit of a behavior change in a learning. We even see it in charging at our facilities. People tend to come today to the office. If you charge, the best place to charge is at home, but people will come to the office, they plug in and they stay there all day. It's a little bit like going to the gas station and getting a gallon of gas every day, which none of us would do. So it really is about behavior. It's about knowledge. It's about options for consumers, the infrastructure. And then I think even more importantly in the long run is in order for us to really have this transition to zero, we need to be charging with green energy. So the decarbonization of the grid has got to be part of the discussion and equation as well.
And I would just to add to that, I would have said exactly the same thing just like 2 years ago. It's range anxiety, it's behaviors, it's charging infrastructure, performance of vehicles. Now I will add that one of the challenges is regulation, because I've been very optimistic from the outgo. It's going to be exponential. We're going to see a hockey stick effect. And now all of a sudden we're seeing policymakers regulating against EV adoption, which is like completely upside down. We're seeing more subsidies for fossil fuel, and we're seeing regulation that nudges the consumers to actually stay with a combustion engine, which is like nudging consumers to stay on an electric typewriter when the computer is right there and obviously much better, which I think is very strange, but obviously it will have impact to subsidize the internal combustion engine.
It's helpful, I think, to step back as well and remind ourselves that we are going through one of the most significant transformations in transportation in quite some time. The last time we've seen something like this is over 100 years ago, right? When we transitioned from horse and buggy to gas-powered automobile. And with that change, and not just in automotive, right, but in the energy systems, when you think about all the stakeholders and players that need to change and adjust to that, that's a lot. And then again, coming back to the consumer point, like consumers don't like to be forced into anything, to your regulation point. So it is about finding the right options for consumers, making sure the infrastructure is right. And from an option perspective, it's interesting with Rivian, our first line of products, the R1T, so the pickup trucks and the R1S SUVs and electric delivery vehicles as the third line, we chose to focus on those because in the US, those are the most popular vehicles, but also the largest emitting. So if you can produce high quality like vehicles that everyone loves from a design perspective, from a performance perspective, and transition people not simply because they're EVs, right, but because these are superior products that you want to purchase, then I think that's where you start to make an impact. And I'm excited because later this week, we are revealing our new R2 line, which is our next generation, smaller, more affordable vehicle.
That was a shameless plug, but I will allow it.
It's an exciting time.
In this context, we need those types of shameless plugs. And I could also plug 3 of our cars, then Polestar 2, 3, and 4. But I would also add a hinder, if we're going to be about the glass being half empty, of us actually being able to do this transition in a sustainable way, that we are lacking capacity in the industry to actually do that. And this is, of course, where we're seeing that the industry is still investing in upholding legacy technology and not funneling all of the resources that we have into figuring out how to transition in a speedier way and also transitioning while making electric vehicles more sustainable. So, I come from the fashion industry earlier before Polestar. I'm used to industries really collaborating on joint sustainability issues to really push the agenda. I love that we're all sitting here, but we are in an industry that is still operating in a very traditional way, in silos, not being able to find ways to collaborate in a meaningful way. So that is a huge hinder for us as well.
I'd like to stay with the thread about infrastructure and pull on that for a little bit more if we can, because it is such a key part of this. I think over time, you see more and more facilities opening up at businesses, at the side of roads, etc. So it's happening. But how do we accelerate that? So I guess that's the key issue. There's no question it is happening, but how do we make that process faster? And where does that responsibility lie? Is that private enterprise? Is that manufacturers? Is that local authorities? Where does that responsibility lie and how can we accelerate that? And I'll start here.
I think it's going to take all the sectors coming together. The responsibility lies with all of us. The answer is very clear. The situation is clear in terms of where the world needs to go and all the sectors that are involved. And I think that it's going to take policy, it's going to take various industries and sectors, and it's going to take the consumer. And I really think that's because the consumer is at the center or the bottom, so to speak, of all of those sectors.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think there's a lot happening in the industry, and you see it, this is, I think, one of the spaces that you do see the collaboration. I often say, and I'm an engineer by degree, I spent most of my career in product development where we weren't really collaborative with our competitors. In this space, in sustainability, I think you see a lot more of that. And I think the North America Charging Standard, the adoption of that across the US, I know a similar thing is happening in other parts of the world. That's a great solution for the consumer. So now the consumer has more choices, more options, and the more that we can do that, governments are engaging, municipalities are engaging. If we continue to build these collaborations across the industry, I think we'll see more and more options and availability. In the end, the consumer wins.
But I think what is slowing it down is really that it takes a village, right? To your point, Denise, it takes everyone, and we're seeing the interface between the automotive, transport, and energy sector. Like it's the same sustainable mobility sector now. And how do you structure those partnerships? It didn't used to be that an OEM would work directly with energy producers, energy distributors, and then you bring in the public sector in this with the municipalities and the governments. it's hard, right? There's a lot of stakeholders and you need to make them all move at roughly the same time towards the same target. And that makes it very difficult. But there are some great examples. And I also think we spent a lot of time in the automotive industry sort of pointing fingers at somebody else. Like, we can produce the vehicles, but there's no charging infrastructure, so it's their fault, right? We can set up charging infrastructure because there's no vehicles on the roads to actually use the chargers, so we can't do it. And then everybody pointing at the regulators, right? So there was a real chicken and an egg situation. And I do think, and now we're coming into the glass half full part of the section, but I do think we're starting to see now just, no more chicken or egg or the nest or whatever. Let's just move on. And I think a really good example is actually coming from the heavy duty side, where like mortal enemies, Daimler, Traton Group, and Volvo working together to set up charging infrastructure across Europe. This is a direct example because they were waiting, and then it's just like, nobody's going to do it for us. Regulators are far too slow. It's not going to happen. If we want to sell the trucks, we're going to have to build the infrastructure, but then also deciding this is not where we compete. We compete on design and performance and brand, all of that, but let's not compete on charging infrastructure because we'll just end up paying more, all of us. And so they're going together. So I think those types of initiatives we'll see more and more, because the ones who don't partner up, they'll be left far, far behind. They'll go out of business.
We've mentioned consumers briefly, so we'll just stay with them for a second, as they are such a critical part of this, because if they're not buying the vehicles, and they aren't encouraged to buy the vehicles in a suitable way, then progress is going to be slow. What more can be done to actually accelerate that process with the consumers? Like, as you said, with your parents who are concerned about not seeing a charging station in a 25-mile radius. I know if I took my mum to buy an EV, she'd be terrified and ask where she put the battery. It'd be true story. How do we break that cycle? How do we get more consumers on board? And I guess that is a literal billion-dollar question.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's still all about the product. I mean, I know if you are from the fashion or consumer products industry, a vehicle is a very personal choice. It is a fashion statement. Many people name their vehicles. I mean, it is the second largest purchase that most people will ever make after their home. So having great products, having a range of products that full scale, that allows you to choose anything from a small family-sized SUV to a full, pickup truck in an off-road performance. People use their vehicles in many cases for their livelihood, and many families only have one vehicle. So it needs to be something that meets the needs of the consumer, and that it's a great product. It needs to be fun to drive. It needs to look great. It has to have the features and capability and safety that consumers are demanding. So I really think the product at the end of the day is what's going to make the transition happen quickly.
And I would also add to that, I so agree that is one of the most important things that we can focus on. But I would also add to that we need to create a more trustful relationship with our consumers in the car industry. The majority of car consumers today actively distrust the automotive industry for good reasons. I mean, there have been a lot of scandals over the years. So really utilizing transparency and data to really build a more engaged relationship with the customers. For example, at Polestar, we have set out to publish life cycle assessments for all of our cars that we have on the market. So as a customer, you won't hear from Polestar that an EV is a perfect thing and it's a sustainable solution. It's more like, this is the best solution that we have today. You should use it, but it also comes with a carbon footprint. And we are working to reduce that in this way. So that is also a huge potential for the industry going forward, trying to reshape now the way that we communicate with customers as we transition into a new technology.
I'll just respectfully disagree a little bit. That customer loyalty is very strong, particularly amongst the OEMs. And so, I mean, at least from a General Motors perspective, it's something that we take very seriously. And the customer is the center of everything we do. In building that trust and building that relationship and having a quality vehicle, continues throughout the life cycle of the vehicle. It doesn't stop with the sale.
Absolutely, and it's amazing. I mean, I absolutely think that we want to take care of our customers.
For sure.
We haven't been able to really show that fully, I think. And we've also had incidences that have been too high. They have been really damaging, yeah, to the industry, to a point where we have some catching up to do. So absolutely, I do think that is our intent, all of us.
But I mean, consumers are not mystical creatures, to be fair. We know that if we make the more sustainable choice, the most affordable and convenient choice, they don't need sustainability as an extra motive. If it's the most convenient and the most affordable and they get good value for money, they're going to transition. So I think, yes, a little bit of education to like get rid of range anxiety and show them this actually works, but it is about giving them convenient choices that corresponds to what they need, and it's about making it affordable too, right? And if you can't afford to buy an electric vehicle, that's a problem. How do we fix that? How do we fix it with the pricing of the vehicle? How do we fix, maybe we don't sell the vehicle then. Maybe we go into mobility as a service solutions or shared solutions, or you need to lease the vehicle so you have a clear monthly cost, whatever it is. But it's about making that choice easy for the consumer, and that's it.
Well, and right now where we are on the adoption curve, right, it's about design and performance and choices. And I think that we're in a really nice space in time in that the more choices, the better. And I think you see a lot of choices up here, and there's so many more that are yet to come from all the OEMs out there. So it's an exciting time again, and I think we have to, going back to the glass half full, or going to the glass full, half full.
Very handily, the title of this panel is Over Your Shoulders, so I don't forget it, and that's the future of electric cars in a net zero world. So we often think about electric vehicles as the future, but we actually need to look to the future of that future, which is one of the worst lines I've ever said on the stage. But let's look further ahead towards the end of life of these vehicles, which seems a long way away, but it isn't really. How important is the design, the construction of the materials used in fitting into that net zero future? Because we can make good decisions now. How do we go about making those right decisions as we're really in the relative spring of this technology?
I love that question. I mean, look, electrification will only take us so far. First of all, it's a big part of the sustainable mobility puzzle, but it's not the only part. Secondly, even if we electrified all cars on the market today, still wouldn't keep the automotive industry on the right path to 1.5, right? Because the automotive industry also needs to address the emissions coming from producing the car, the energy that goes into the car to actually propel it forward. So there's like 3 buckets, and Rivian and Polestar had a pathway report coming out last year that showed this very clearly, right? Electrification, yes, green energy to charge it, but then also upstream scope 3 emissions, right? And that goes to your question about circularity, and what we put in the car will matter when we reuse the car, right? So if we look at the battery, and you and I had a discussion about this already last year, but I'll shamelessly go back to it because it's so important. But if we look at the battery, will become the most valuable part of the vehicle, right? And today we use it to move a car forward, and then we go straight into recycling. It's just a waste of money and resources because there's so much more we can do with a battery. We can use it for secondary appliances, we can use it for V2X technology, help balance that energy. For those of you who were downstairs earlier today and heard about how to make buildings more sustainable, huge part of that. We can use it in stationary storage, mobile storage, so many value pools to tap into, which we don't. It would also make the battery more circular. We would also use the battery for more. We can make fewer batteries, which is good because they come with their whole set of social impact issues and climate issues in itself, right? But we need to start using the car more efficiently, and that goes for the material too. And that can't be an afterthought. It's really hard to take a product and make it circular once you've already designed it and decided how you're going to sell it. That needs to come at the point of design. What materials do we use? How do we put them together so we can easily take them apart? How do we design this product so we can reuse as much as possible? Because that will also lower emissions, and that will also lower any negative social impact that it has. So it needs to come right from the design of the vehicle and the business models that goes with the vehicle. Because we need to get to that point where we start questioning some core business models in the automotive industry and say, like, is there a different way of doing this to
Which is
keep
happening,
going?
right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if I just take General Motors as an example, first off, we have ingrained sustainability into every aspect of our business. So it really is the engineer starting from day one of thinking, how do I design it for disassembly, just like I design the part or vehicle for serviceability, for manufacturability. It's working with our creative designers on choosing materials that are more sustainable. It's thinking about what is the life cycle of the battery or other parts of the vehicle. Frankly, we do remanufacturing on headlamps. We do recycling on lots of parts. Batteries, we have a whole division, GM Energy, that's looking at secondary storage and V2X, and all of those solutions are part of it. It can't be a one-stop choice. It needs to be a total encompassing aspect of the business. And so, I mean, if you think of a company like General Motors that's been around for well over 100 years, innovation is at the core of everything we do. And it's not just that giant leap forward to the next technology. It's every single day engineers and designers thinking about, how do I make it more efficient? How do I make sure that our own processes are sustainable and efficient? We announced last year that we had already achieved our objective of being 100% renewable in our operations in the US by 2025, which was 25 years ahead of our original goal, and we're well on our way to do that globally. So everything that we can do to address our own operations, and then the vehicle, and then the grid, and then the infrastructure, all of that has to be part of the equation.
We have so much problem-solving capability and innovation capability within automotive companies. I was shocked at the level of capability and knowledge that you just have in-house in a car company. And it's amazing to see designers and engineers taking on the sustainability challenges like they've had, the cost challenges or the efficiency challenges, because they can really solve these problems through that attention that they're putting on it. And we've actually connected to circularity. We've created a KPI for our engineers to use. So we're measuring grams per kilometer, grams of non-circular material per kilometer driven by the car. So we're trying to utilize two levers. So securing that we are integrating more circular materials, it could be recycled, reused, bio-based, while also extending the mileage of the car, so the lifespan of the car. So really optimizing circularity from a KPI perspective is so interesting, because it can be really fluffy otherwise.
No, but what gets measured gets done.
Yeah. Well, and to the measurement point, I couldn't agree more with what you said, Angela, and everyone else actually, in terms of building in circularity from the beginning. I mean, it's really critical. It's a must have. But when it comes to the data and measuring what gets done, publishing our life cycle assessments, right, putting that out there, making the methodology open and transparent, these are the sorts of conversations that really will help evolve the industry and provide clarity to consumers and other stakeholders so that we can all move further together faster.
Okay, well, I have plenty more questions I would like to ask, but I also appreciate we have a room full of people who also probably have questions. So what I will do is I will come to the room, and if there's time, I'll come back to some more of mine afterwards. So this is where I have to jump up and come finding people. So first hand was there, then there, so I'll work my way around.
Hi. So you've talked a bit about product adoption and talked about end of life. What about the second-hand market? Because everybody I talk to is scared of buying a second-hand EV. What can the manufacturers do to allay some of those fears?
I mean, I'll just speak from our standpoint. We've been in the secondary market for many, many years, and certified GM, and I don't expect any of that to be any different from an EV perspective. And standing behind the products, our products are designed for a long, life cycle as it is, and so I don't see a concern there.
So again, it's really about just delivering this information to the consumer, and that's where again they will only trust that information if we show that we take responsibility for.
I mean, we're actually seeing the batteries are lasting much longer than anyone ever anticipated, and the amount of useful energy. That's what we talked about, the secondary usage that's available is continuing to be better than people anticipated.
Yeah.
And also the over-the-air software updates. I mean, I think one of the things that I've loved is just being able to not take your car in anywhere, but have all these updates come through very seamlessly. It's a huge advantage.
So it's actually kind of a conundrum because we of course need the battery minerals as well. We need recycled minerals, so it's like they're going to be used in the car for a long time, it seems.
Which is a good thing.
It's a good thing, but it's a challenge that we need to solve somehow.
An excellent question. I've already forgotten where the next ones were. I believe it was there. Yep, thank you. This is the strength of my memory test, where I identify people, then quickly forget. There you go.
I have a question from the panel. First of all, I'd like to just address that 4 women sitting at the CSO position for a woman that wants to be there. It's extremely, extremely encouraging. Secondly, I think, Fredrika, you're from a fashion background. So what is it advice you will give to someone who is going from a fashion background and wants to make transition into the auto industry and wants to be somewhere where you are? So that's my first question. I'll take the opportunity to ask another one. The other question is more for the panel, that I see, as I have researched into the EV industry, the difference between the European growth versus the US growth. The US growth is nowhere near how the European market is growing. So how is the panel, what's the panel's thoughts on it? What insight can you share with respect to that?
Can I start by plugging you then, so you don't have to do it yourself? For those who want to listen more to Fredrika's journey and women in the automotive industry in general, tomorrow, as part of International Women's Day and Week, there will be an interview with Fredrika talking about exactly this. You can find it on her LinkedIn.
Now you also plugged your own event. That was really smart of you. Yeah.
See what I did there?
So super smart. I just love this. I mean, we need to get a coffee in a couple of hours because this is very unique. I think that you can bring so much to the automotive industry with the experiences that you've had from fashion. I was just talking about how I see that the fashion industry really wants to collaborate across brands and are making that happen in a fantastic way, and really coming to the industry and being generous with that knowledge and those experiences. And I think that you're going to meet an industry and companies that are so susceptible to this. Because I do believe that we all are seeing things very clearly now. We have set our net zero targets, for example. We know the challenges that we have in our supply chains in terms of equity and social justice. We're all about now what tools can we use to really secure that we deliver on our strategies. And those tools I see have been adopted by the fashion industry in a great way. So yeah, please bring them to us.
And then we'll move on to the second part of the question, which was about the US and Europe comparison.
Yes.
I was going to say to that question, which is a great one, right? It comes down to, I mean, we know that the transportation industry is the largest emitter, right? And it was interesting. I came over to Rivian from 20 years at Tiffany & Company as their chief sustainability officer. And one of the things that I realized when I came over to the automotive industry is I was trying to find the information sort of that I could easily access in terms of the data. And that is why, and Angela mentioned this earlier, that's why Rivian co-commissioned along with Polestar the Pathway Report, right? To assess what it is that needs to happen in the industry so that we can remain the IPCC recommendations. And just to reiterate, because it's important, there are 3 levers that need to be pulled, right? Electrification of transportation, reducing emissions in the supply chain, and then transitioning to renewable energy. And I don't think that any of those 3 levers were particularly surprising, but what the data showed is that we must pull on all 3 levers really hard and at the same time. And so that is where, when I hear, and when we all hear about sort of slowing adoption of EVs, it just sort of, I'm just reminded of the Pathway Report and the fact that actually we don't really have time to slow down on any one of those 3 levers. So I think it's important for us to make sure that that information, right, this publicly available data is out there, and we share that message.
But also to posit, there are so much going on that we're not all aware of. Like, I am in this space all the time, and I'm still pleasantly surprised very often. So we do see these initiatives. I know, Kristen, you guys, for instance, are working for the automotive industry to green the grid, for instance, gearing up to do pilots and start this work in the US. So there is a lot of work ongoing that we don't always see, and I'm sort of hoping it's gonna be when you pull the plug out of the bathtub and it just like flushes out. That moment when that happens and we start like exponentially decarbonize the automotive industry, that's gonna be a great moment. But it takes a lot of work, and not quietly, we like to talk about what we do, but it's going to take a lot of work behind the scenes before we all see the effect.
And I mean, what we're seeing now is of course, policymakers really stepping back on their promises. And for example, in Sweden, we have a situation where the government has decreased the price on fossil fuels and taken away the subsidies for EVs. So we're actually seeing a reduction in sales of EVs. So it's a terrible situation, and I don't want to sugarcoat it in any way. But it also really points out the fact that we need to send an even clearer signal from the industry. We need to be super clear about where we are going, to the point where policymakers feel like they should just get out of our way. And I just loved listening to Al Gore at COP28 in Dubai. He actually, one of his key messages was that we have all of the solutions that we need to really stay within the 1.5 degree pathway. EVs are such a solution. And more importantly, we've hit the famous inflection point when it comes to EV adoption, from where there will be an acceleration that no one can stop. There's no going back. So even if policymakers are making terrible decisions right now, I'm trusting in Al. We will never go back.
No.
And I would just say I'll remain the internal optimist that if you build your sustainability strategy into your business strategy, it doesn't become reliant on outside factors. It becomes products that consumers want to purchase and want to drive, and it becomes good business decisions. Our renewable energy is another great business decision. And so the more that you can do that, the more you build it into your strategies, it takes those outside factors out of the equation.
It does. Regulation is for laggards, but it does matter on a macro scale, of course. And that's why Europe, moved faster, right? We had regulations. Europe started saying like 2035, that's it. No new ICE cells, which means that if you don't transition to EVs, you're not going to sell a car in Europe by 2035. Of course, those things matter a lot, because if you want to stay in business, you have to adopt. And now that we see such regulation being, toned down or even rolled back, it does hurt the acceleration. But we have reached the tipping point. There's no going back.
But it's important to underscore too, not just for this panel, but for the entire topic of this gathering, right? The greening of the grid. And it's something that I know automotives are focused on, but if we don't watch where our vehicles, how they're being charged in terms of where the energy comes from, that's critically important. And one of the things that we've done is partner with the Nature Conservancy on what we call the 3C approach. So making sure that climate, conservation, and also communities are at the core of how renewable projects are stood up. And that's really important so that we make sure that people and local communities are part of that. And one of the efforts that we actually led is in Kentucky. So it's one of the largest in the country coal to solar projects that incorporates this 3C component. I think we're going to hear a lot more of these sorts of initiatives, which are critically important as we try to grow this work.
Okay, I was actually going to go for my lunch, but if you guys are still going, I will move on quickly with another shameless plug. If you're particularly interested in Frederica's story, you are the cover star of Sustainability magazine this month as well. So that was a modest face if ever I saw one, but there's plenty more in that. A shameless plug if ever there was one from me, but I'm the host, so I'm allowed. Moving swiftly on, we've got time for a couple more quick questions. I believe there was one at I think yours was the next. So if we can try and keep this relatively quick.
Question. According to you, what is the percentage of green energy being used in the EV charging station, public EV charging station in the US and in Europe? I drive
don't
an
know.
EV.
Wow,
but
it varies
don't know.
dramatically by
According to
region
you.
and area.
I know that Rivian's network is powered 100% by renewable energy, but I don't have the number for
Tesla?
the total.
Do you know about Tesla?
It's. I think what the thing here is we don't know. There is no transparency to the point where we can safely, as customers, know what we are putting in our batteries, and that is one of the most annoying things now, because they can absolutely get this data up and running. So if you have a solution there, that would be lovely.
The one solution, first of all, is the charging station that are using the green energy. They should advertise it.
They should
Actually,
advertise
not
it,
always the
absolutely.
case.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think Unity does.
yeah.
Thank you. Core principle of carbon reduction is use less. Why do we still promote a one-for-one switch from a diesel vehicle, petrol vehicle to an EV? Why aren't we talking about modal shift more?
I think we are.
We are.
I see, like you were saying earlier, the solutions are already popping up. Like in Sweden, for example, and on many other markets, there are apps now really making it redundant, kind of, for OEMs having to figure out how to promote sharing of our products. I mean, we see communities really solving this in an amazing way. So I do think that this is on top of the agenda, but of course, we need to figure out how to secure a cost model that can support that.
It's a bit
way.
selfish.
So
I work in the public transport sector, so hence the question. But I don't see the automotive industry pushing, or the car sector pushing this. It's very much coming from communities to try to drive that forward rather than the automotive sector.
I think yes and no. I don't build cars, so I'll take it. But I do think we are seeing the automotive industry also testing new business models, right, for more shared mobility.
Autonomous.
Obviously, it's going to be tough for anyone selling a product to say, hey guys, everyone stop buying my product. It is a product that is needed, and we need to make it better and more sustainable. But I think overall, we do see a lot of conversation about investing in biking infrastructure, about investing in the public transportation shift and avoid. If we look more on the heavy duty side, we talk a lot about intermodal and moving to trains and ships and all of that. So I do think the discussion is there. I think it's a healthy discussion. I think the fact that most cars are utilized less than 8% of the time is just wasteful, right? And they're expensive to find parking for. So I do think that conversation is well and alive, but it's a slightly different conversation, right? I want to have that with the municipalities to say, like, look at Copenhagen, for instance, where more than, I think, 80% or something of all commutes to work, school, daycare happens on a bike, because they invested millions and millions and millions of euro in building a safe biking infrastructure. That's fantastic. It's a slightly different, it's probably not going to be you guys investing in biking.
our responsibility is to fit into that ecosystem, and to secure that we build cars that can last, that can take the wear and tear of being shared and being, intermodal and so on. So that's our responsibility, absolutely.
Hi, Simon Mal from McLaren Applied. I'd just like to come back to the charging infrastructure discussion. Where does the panel see the direction of travel? Does the panel see increasingly faster charging products coming with more capable battery technology continuing? And if so, where do we need to get charging to?
I think it's an all-in, right? You need to be able to, part of the solutions that we're looking at, again, we're not waiting. This whole chicken and the egg discussion is, General Motors. We won't be able to build the infrastructure all by ourselves, but we certainly want to be part of the solution. So in the US, for some of the major thoroughfares, the highways across the country. We've partnered with Pilot and Flying-J at some of the major stops for DC fast charging, so consumers can make that part of their long road trip. The reality is the most efficient and most cost-effective charging is at home right now, and so we need to make sure that that's part of the solution, even for multi-dwelling, locations, et cetera. Workplace charging is another one. So it's a very complex question, right? And how you operate and how you live within an EV world is maybe a little different than how you live within a gas-powered world. And it's no different than when we first got cell phones, right? We all were very worried about how we charged them. And I still go back to as an engineer, I believe innovation spurs innovation. And so, when you first got cell phones, you didn't have wireless charging, you didn't have extra batteries that were available. All of those solutions are things that are continued, whether it's battery swapping, wireless charging, remote charging, right? There's lots of things that are happening and going to happen faster to make the experience better for the consumer.
And I think now, as we are still building it up, we don't have the luxury of building the optimal, perfect charging infrastructure from the beginning, right? Because we cannot put up fast chargers at every facility, every place, because the grid just can't handle it. In my former life, I worked for a very large Swedish home furnishing company with very ambitious mobility targets, right? And we started putting up chargers at every store we had across the world. But the thing is, if you put up chargers for you guys, the customers in the front, and you put up chargers for commercial vehicles in the back to load, to charge while they're loading, then you can't put the air fryer on in the kitchen because there's, the cable's just not thick enough, which we, were a bit ahead of the curve on that. So we ran face first into a lot of these energy assessments. You should do those first. So it's also about building what we can, but then I'm with Kristen on this one. I think we still have so much to see, electric roads and all types of different types of charging that we don't have access to today.
And also at a very basic level, making sure we're maintaining infrastructure that's out there.
Yeah, reliable, resilient, renewable.
Well, we could, I'm sure, fill the rest of the afternoon with this panel. We, in future years, maybe do a third day just for this particular subject. So my thanks to Kristen, to Angela, Frederica and Anissa. And I'm going to do one more shameless plug, if I may. All four are in our Top 100 Women in Sustainability, which is out on the 8th of March for some reason. I can't think why we picked that date. So a round of applause. Thank you.